Welcome to Real Talk, live from the barn, a new show from a visionary brand strategist, Emilio Pardo. Tonight's guests are former acting secretary, U.S. Secretary of Labor, and member of President Barack Obama's cabinet, Seth Harris, career expert, Dr. Rich Feller, Richard Leiter, best-selling author of The Power of Purpose, and Monica P. Hawkins, founder, CEO of Professional Pipeline Development Group. Tonight's topic, is this the end of work as we know it?
Hi there. Welcome to Real Talk live at the barn. My name is Emilio Pardo, and I am so glad you're here. This is a very special place, the barn. So 21 years ago, we built this barn for friends and family, for conversation, for playing, for listening to music, but then slowly and gradually it became a place to have a conversation about how to get through life, how to get through the week, how to get through the day. So as you can see, it is filled with memorabilia of different places that we've been and where people have brought us some trinkets from all around the world. But the real magic of this barn is the conversations and the real talk we've had here and the answers that we have found to some of our greatest problems. You see, we're going to 3 pandemics: a COVID pandemic, an economic pandemic, and a racial injustice pandemic. All 3 of these are creating havoc on our mental strength, and we need real talk to find real answers. You see, I know about real talk. I'm a cancer survivor, pancreatic cancer, but I'm also communication. And pair you up with experts that can help us find some answers and tips on how to get through the day and how to get through these pandemics. So, welcome, sit back, pull up a chair, and let's have a real conversation. Let's get started. And welcome to the barn. Yes, the barn is open for real talk, and today's conversation is a big one. We're talking about jobs. And as we all know, there's 25.5 million people in the unemployment line. There's a growing line of food lines with cars, now looking at hundreds and hundreds of people that are looking for answers on how to try to get, not just getting a job, but in some cases, we have to figure out what do we do for a living that is different than what we have today. And the reality is that there's no one single bullet. There are many bullets. And today, we're going to give you a lot of those bullets. And hopefully, we can give you a little bit of perspective and places and things to do in order to win this game of trying to find ourselves not on the unemployment line, but to get ourselves into our next step in our careers and in our jobs and taking care of our families. And I cannot be happier. For today, we have an amazing lineup of experts that have been there, done that are actually in the front lines, helping millions of people and hundreds of thousands of people, in some cases at every single level of our society, whether it's in the brown and black communities, whether it's in the CEO suites. We're all feeling the same thing. What do I do now? And what do I do for a job? Well, let's get started. And I cannot imagine a better way to start than a welcoming back to the barn, Mr. Richard Leiter. Richard, come on in. Welcome to the barn.
A privilege to be back, always. Thank you, Emilio, for inviting me back.
It's always fun to see you at the barn. It's always fun to see you at the barn. Folks, what we're talking about here goes way beyond just getting a job. And the rules are different. The rules are probably non-existent anymore. At least not the old rules that we used to have. So you got to step back and figure out, well, what am I good at? what is my calling in life? What are my gifts? And all of us have those. But the question is, how do we navigate through that? And Richard, what are you seeing out there? And the bottom line is that we're all are in this together. You, me, everybody on this panel today is thinking about the same thing. What's next? But what is happening, and how do we step back and deal with this new phenomenon in this what I call another pandemic?
Well, first of all, let's look at what's going on out there for a minute, and then what's going on in here second to that. So what's going on out there is it's the end of work as we know it. Gone are the days when having a job meant doing your job and doing it well. It used to be you had a two-way contract. That's pretty much over for most people. It's the end of the average worker. You can't just have a job and hold on to it and expect to keep it these days. There's everyone, as you mentioned, from the C-suite across the spectrum has to have a new life skill. And that new life skill is about really relooking at their value proposition, what they're bringing to the party. And one other thing about what's going on out there, zero security.
Yep.
You incorporated. In other words, you have to treat yourself like a free agent. And everyone, no matter where they are, has to figure out or have kind of an entrepreneurial, not necessarily an entrepreneurial, but an entrepreneurial mindset, how they can continue to add value and innovate. So what's going on in here is that, so what's the point? There's something called a job, something called a career, and something called a calling. And a job just pays the bills, a career maybe less secure than it's ever been. But a calling, I want to just share quickly. I used to be the number 2 HR person in what is now U.S. Bank. And when I was there, I had what's now called a side hustle. I didn't know what it was called then. But I had a gig because I'm trained in the psychological field as a career counselor, et cetera. So HR was my day job, but I had a side gig called Lunch Hour Limited. Now, Emilio, you can figure that one out. Lunch Hour Limited means you buy me lunch, I coach you, I counsel you about.
Yep.
And I had a waiting list a mile long of people at the bank who would buy me lunch. And and what they wanted was to do something that they loved, something that fit their gifts, passions, and values, so to speak. And they hadn't had much guidance with that. So I had a very successful side gig, which eventually turned into my profession. But I want to say one thing about that, Emilio, to finish, and that is I had an 80% success ratio. 80% of the people that I coached quit. Now,
wow. I'm sure your CEO was really happy about that.
Actually, they didn't quit and leave. Most of them quit and stayed. They went back and reinvented their job, talked to their boss, and really relooked at how they were doing and who they were bringing to what they were doing in certain ways. And so I think that kind of thinking is what we need today as a life skill. Everybody's an experiment of one. Everybody's got to push the pause button, step back, and look at what they bring to the party. That organizations that I work today are not hiring for experience anymore. Your resume is basically worthless. What they're hiring for is expertise, what you can do to help them entrepreneurial solve their problems. So I'll stop there, but I learned a ton by having my own side gig, which eventually turned into what I do, and I learned a lot about how oftentimes our jobs and our careers choose us. We don't choose them. And then eventually we get to a point like the pandemic, like what's going on today, and we have to figure out now how to really choose and how to move forward in a very, very complex environment.
Richard, let's go there for a minute, because when you talk about calling, you also are talking about things that are innately the right thing for you because it's your passion, right? Or your gift. But in a time like this, in a time where we don't have a job, I don't have a paycheck, and from paycheck to purpose, we both need to work on that calling, because that's the the trigger that might open up a new job, right? I mean,
Exactly.
how do we get into that mode where we find out what our calling is?
Well, well, first of all, it may be that we need a day job to pay the bills, but
That's
we
right.
also need a plan B, and that is the calling type of thing. So let's look at this slide. I call it the napkin test, the formula for looking at calling. And they call it the napkin test because a lot of great ideas come out on the backs of napkins. I call this, by the way, Emilio, the Got a Minute School of Coaching.
I love it.
People today say, Richard, got a minute? Can you tell me what I can do with the rest of my life? Or can you tell me what I should do now? And I say, take out this napkin if you only got a minute and write down this formula. Gifts plus passions plus values equals calling. This is what I have learned over decades. If you had to boil it all down into the silver bullet, this is it. What are your gifts? What are your most enjoyed? Not just your background, your experience, but what are your most enjoyed gifts that you're motivated to really use? What are your interests, your passions, your curiosities? Well, how would you like to use those in the world? And values, this is the number one knockout factor in much career research. Values is really about environment, where you're doing what you're doing. And so many people today, the percentage, we're going to hear from Seth in a few minutes, but so many people today are free agents. They're working on their own rather than in a values-driven culture. So they've got to know a lot about themselves. This equals calling. And so I think this is what I'd like to say is the life skill. Everybody needs to do the napkin test.
So everybody here is watching. If you look at the napkin, you have your gift, what are you good at, right? That's another way of saying.
It's actually what you love to do, because when I ask people what they love to do and what they'd like to do, and back to the lunch hour limited, oftentimes people really, really did not know what they wanted to do. They just knew that they wanted to make more money and have a corner office or, do certain, but when it came down to actually what they were going to do and how they were going to add value, they were pretty much clueless. And I think people today need to not be clueless. They need to do their homework.
Absolutely. What about, the concept of gifts, passions, and values, and then you have your calling. Now I have a North Star, right? Now I have a direction to go to. Wait, this is not about money. This is about zero money on one end and a multi-billionaire on the other. The napkin test, as I see it, it's relevant to both sides of that spectrum. Am I missing something, or is that right?
You're right. And if you think about, look at this slide, what's your calling card?
Yeah.
Calling card's kind of an antiquated thing in the internet world, but think about the front of your calling card. What does it tell you about you? Not much. It tells you where to get a hold of you and kind of what your title is, but it doesn't tell you in the back. So what's on the back of your card? The back is what it is that you really bring, that you're passionate about, and that you can add value. So think about what could, on the back of my card, it says, unlock the power of purpose. What I do is help people discern their calling. That's another term for that. So what would be in the back of your card? What would be in the back of your listeners' cards? We need to start thinking about it a little bit differently from the back, not from the front.
Yeah. And by the way, I love the simplicity of that, because we all grew up knowing that we have a business card.
Right.
This is a calling card.
Yeah.
And that calling card is your card to give you confidence, to give you an idea and a direction. But it's also very useful when you're writing a letter for an interview, right? Or you're drafting an email to that potential new boss. If they can see the calling and the passion that you have, or maybe they don't see it, but you're there because it is part of your calling.
Exactly. One of life's most dangerous questions is this: what do you do? Whether it's at a party or at a gathering, or what do you do? And often what does that really tell you? It puts you in a box. But what you really need to do is get beyond the question and look at, well, here's what's on the front of my card, but here's what I really do and what I can do for you.
Are there ways that you can get to that calling that are simple, or the napkin test I get? What about if I don't have that luxury and I don't remember that? What will be a good tip for you to give us?
Take out 5 index cards and give 5 index cards blank to 5 people who know you and ask them what they observe you loving to do, not historically what you're doing now. What do they see you really loving to do in terms of real talents? And then look at the themes. When those 5 cards come back, most people are shocked when they see that others observe them doing things effortlessly and superbly that they do and that they observe them doing. And one of the big surprises to people is the gifts that they really love, the strongest, are things they can't recall learning. They don't have a degree in it. They don't have a certificate in it. They've been just doing it naturally and effortlessly for their whole lives. And when I've done research on this and gone back with something I call calling cards and asked your parents, if I could, or your teachers or your siblings, they say, yeah, oh yeah, Emilio, he's always been like that. And the fact is, when I ask in a group of people, I say, raise your hands if you got a brother and sister. And they, most people, not everybody does. And then I'll say, well, how many are your brothers and sisters most gifts the same as yours? And they laugh out loud. They say, well, no, not at all. And I said, well, when did you start to notice that? Well, when we were little. Well, gifts differing. We're all unique. We're all an experiment of one. But we haven't had much guidance, and that's why Lunch Hour Limited was successful. What they needed was a midlife career counselor, guidance counselor, which is what Rich Feller, and who's on this line, does for a living, or has done for a living, I should say, and me too. And so we need it from cradle to grave, not just when we're young.
And we're going to give you the real specifics down to not a resume, but LinkedIn. We're going to get to that, but I want to push us a little bit further. The title of the show is "The End of Work as We Know It Today."
Yeah.
Why, Richard?
Well, look at Uber, look at Lyft, look at Airbnb, look at all the examples. You can go on and on. But it's the end of work because, as I said, zero security. And we look at you incorporated. How many people today have to act like a free agent even if they're not? But I think it's about 41% of the American workforce is free agent or consultant contract, who have to every day figure out how to bring their value to the world. Well, the same is true in organizations and being an entrepreneur, bringing that innovative things. It's a new world. The new currency is not your resume. Resume is it's not your experience, it's your expertise. That is, and you have to be able to back that up with some sort of, and you have to keep renewing yourself. Self-renewal is the life skill of the job market in the 21st century. Not easy. Sometimes we need jobs, day jobs, but don't give up looking at your calling, because ultimately you're not going to get better at your job. Probably you're going to get better at your calling, because that is something you care about, you want to learn about, you enjoy doing. And if you can figure out a way to make a living with that, which is, I'm not saying it's easy, it's work. But the key thing is that it is work.
Yeah, I love the napkin test, Richard, but tell you what, let's push this to a whole nother level. Let's bring to the barn Seth Harris, former Secretary of Labor and professor at Cornell University, a dear friend. And if anybody knows what's going on right now with the employment issues in this country, it's Seth Harris. Seth, welcome to the barn. I don't think you've actually been to the barn.
This is my very first time in the barn, Emilio, but let me say it looks amazingly like my home office. I didn't realize that we have the same decorating taste. So,
yeah, you have as many tchotchkes as I have, right?
Exactly.
Seth, listen, I know this is a hard question, but the fact is that we are facing an enormous challenge when it comes to work. And as a company, you're facing enormous challenges finding the right people to the right places. But now all of a sudden, we've turned that upside down and the jobs are not there. But tell us, first of all, where are we today in this pandemic issue with jobs? Where are we today as we sit here?
Well, our country and the working families in it are facing an immense amount of economic and emotional pain right now. 216,000 people have been lost to the COVID epidemic. Almost 8 million people have been infected, and all the fear that comes with that, the sense of loss that comes with losing a family member. There is the deep economic loss associated with losing a family member as well. One of the leading causes of people being driven out of the middle class is the loss of a breadwinner or a support person in the family. And then with respect to jobs, we have 10 million fewer jobs right now than we had back in February of this year. As you said in your opening, we have 25.5 million people collecting unemployment benefits, and we now have 3.8 million people who have lost their job and have no job to go back to. They are what my friends at the Bureau of Labor Statistics call permanently furloughed. The economy is still very, very, very slowly recovering. We're in a jobs recession. And, some of the, just pointing back to some of the things that Richard said, for the people whose jobs were their callings, not merely economic support, there is the loss of your life's mission. Think of the cooks, think of the people in the entertainment business, people who are pilots or flight attendants, and that's what they always dreamed of being. So there's the meaningful economic loss for all of those families, and 40% of people earning 40 a year lost their jobs during this jobs recession. But also there's the loss of your sense of self, the loss of your sense of identity. So this is a deeply disrupted and painful time in our country.
Well, here's a question that someone gave us at the beginning of the show, and I'm not sure if you can answer this, but this is a question that I have also. How long is this going to go on? I mean, one of the biggest issues that we have is the insecurity that we're feeling because we don't know how long this thing is going to last. Now, we do know that there's an election coming up, and that will bring its own set of facts and realities. But from your vantage point, what's your crystal ball telling us so that we can then plan for this? Because it's not just having a calling, it's also how long do I have to get a job and how long can I last?
Well, I wish I had the answer to that question, and even the best economic prognosticators don't really know. Part of it is going to depend upon what our government does to intervene. When you're in a situation like we're in right now, a jobs recession, a very slow economic recovery, what we need more than anything is for the government to step in and provide loans and funding to businesses, provide extended unemployment benefits to workers, provide support to farmers, to provide food to people who are hungry. You were talking about the food lines that are growing all across the United States. There is a lot of food insecure people. Providing support to schools and employers so they can bring people back safely, not just bringing them back, but bringing them back safely. And we're talking about, honestly, trillions of dollars that are needed. So the government is going to have to step up. But what that will merely do is prop us up until we're able to fully get back to work. And that's going to require effective vaccines, an effective regime of masking, testing and contact tracing, social distancing, and that's going to last for a good long time. The first generation of vaccines won't get us there. They'll only be guessing now 50 or 60% effective. That's frankly how effective the flu vaccine is that we get every year. But if we get up to an 80 or 90% effective vaccine in the second wave of vaccines, that is going to be when we're able to get back to full strength and when all of us are going to feel comfortable getting on an airplane, going to the store, sending our kids to school. I think we're in for a long haul. We're in for a long haul.
Okay, so let's go there. Long haul, maybe mid-year next year, maybe all through 21, perhaps, maybe.
I think we're going to begin to see improvement, again, depending upon the election outcome. I think we're going to begin to see improvement if we get a government program that's serious about trying to boost the economy and attack this pandemic. I think the middle of the year we'll see meaningful improvement, but we're not going to get all the way back, I think, during 2021. At the earliest, it'll be the end of 2021, early 2022, when we really begin to see some version of normal. And even then, I think there's still going to be challenges around the country. So we've got a long road to go.
Yeah, well, but at the same time, we need to prepare for the long haul, but it's also the short term. And there was a comment here from one of our viewers, Kate, that really resonates with me when she says that, maybe it's not the end of work, but it's the end of employment, meaning that, we're going to do something work-wise that is following our calling. Hopefully that'll give us a little bit of a direction, right? And hope. But then timing kicks in, to your point, Seth. We don't know yet, but we do know that there will be vaccine. We do know that there will be a recovery of some sort. And in fact, we're seeing some of that already in some of the sectors. But if you've lost your job as a server or as a chef or, in the airline industry, you're going to have to deal with work, maybe not employment in the regular sense, but you need to open your mind to those new directions and new challenges. Richard, do you have a reflection on that, particularly after you have your napkin test, you got your calling, we know what our timing is, but open mind to something that you probably never thought you would do?
Not really. What I would say is sometimes we're pushed by pain and sometimes we're pulled by possibility. And so pushed by pain as Seth related the numbers, that's a lot of pain. We're pushed by pain. We've got to do what we can do to survive today. Pulled by possibility, though, is that we've got to pull ourselves out of this. The government can support us for a period of time, but maybe. But the fact is, we're all going to have to learn new life skills to figure this out. This is all new territory. So I wish I had an answer for that, but I think hope comes from some sort of work and self-awareness, and there's no way out. We're not going to do this without everybody stepping up to their own game.
Yeah, let's go there for a minute, and let's bring on Monica Hawkins to the barn. My dear friend Monica Hawkins, a consultant extraordinaire, and someone who has been focusing on looking for and searching for talent, global talent, national talent. But Monica, welcome to the barn, and with your friends here.
Hi, how's everyone doing?
Doing awesome. Question for you, Monica. You have been out there now for a long time, and something that is close to my heart is, what are some of the communities, both brown and black communities, are experiencing that we may not be so clear-headed, but they're experiencing it real time?
I would be remiss if I didn't say I was getting a little choked up when Richard said pushed by pain.
Yes.
Because I started thinking of Negro spirituals.
Wow.
And started hearing some of the moans, because that journeying is a way of living and a way of encouraging through culture that I think Black and Brown have always lived with and celebrated and encouraged one another through every difficulty, and always found possibility. I think everyone would agree.
Yeah, I love that concept of pushed by pain, pulled by possibility.
Pulled by possibility.
And folks, they're both good. They
Yes.
both can work for you, but you need to recognize when is a push by pain. I am being forced to do something that I probably didn't really like, or there's a possibility there that comes to you from out of nowhere, and both are equally as effective.
I would say that in this season of 2020, there was a blanket of social injustice labeled that brought history forward, that gave a new context, I think, to the world of work. And I'm so heartened by the luminaries that you brought to the barn today, Emilio, and your commitment to this discussion, because leaders had to redefine themselves and how authentic they wanted to be to their workers. And I'd like to break that down at 3 levels: the organizational level, the functional level, and the individual level. organizations were forced to have, they felt they were forced to have courageous conversations about what was all of this, all of a sudden conversation about racism. And the pandemic, everyone, even if you weren't in the healthcare business, you were in the pandemic fighting business. And then you put on top of that this conversation about racism. Am I a racist? And then on top of that, furloughs and layoffs and supply chains being disrupted and suppliers being disrupted and R&D being disrupted and interrupted. And then you look at some data, real-time data, 85% of creativity now being the way people get valued. Enterprises being valued by creativity, which means people. 40 years ago was a flip, was based on manufacturing.
That goes to Richard's point about the resume is almost irrelevant.
It is the people that generate the ideas and the creativity. And by the way, last time I checked, America doesn't create too much anymore.
Yeah. Now listen, you still need a piece of paper, right? You'll probably need a piece of paper.
But for Black and brown people, that level of conversation was marginalized and undervalued to them, right? So if you put the culture lens on it, Amelia, which is, I think, what you were asking me, there has been a resilience and a hope and a striving to be included in that conversation. And I will call on, someone who was celebrated recently, Chaz Boseman, and the Wakanda, if you will, spirit,
right?
Forever. that comes to life, that says we have so much that we can offer in the spirit of vibranium, that we want to the creativity if you let us into those rooms. So now, in the spirit of needing innovation and creative ideas across technology and life sciences, there is a need in this flattening of people working from home and where the idea is going to come from. Leaders are saying, wait a minute, I didn't know all this stuff was in the middle, because hierarchy is flattened. And now leaders are saying, wait a minute, I got to redefine my leadership piece. And Black and brown is being discovered as something else. And so there's a disruption happening in the interruption in this conversation, and it's getting lost in this, I need a chief diversity officer who never had any power to begin with. And the need to discover who wasn't around the corners and who was lost in the sauce and who was never included to begin with in this organizational structure and this functional enterprise that can really drive value and growth when we do come back to some sense of whatever normal's going to be. I don't know. I think normal's gone.
Yeah. Hey, Seth, in your work, what is the reality for the Black and brown community as it relates to the unemployment numbers? Are they skewed disproportionately?
Yeah, we had a short period before the pandemic when African American unemployment, Black unemployment had come down in the United States and was approaching the low levels of white unemployment. But now we are back to the historical sad fact that Black unemployment is roughly double what white unemployment is. Latino unemployment is somewhere in between, still higher than white unemployment. And I think Monica's point about this is a very important one. That's a situation that has persisted for a long period of time, but has become intolerable. And I think a lot of companies who had those diversity and inclusion professionals, they had an affirmative action office, whatever they wanted to call it. In the old days, they called it an affirmative action office. And now they're actually saying, no, we really, really need to have a diverse workforce. We understand the value of it. We understand what we've been doing. We understand that some of our practices are part of a systemically racist approach to employment and economics in our society. But they need a lot of help figuring out how to fix it, because people go back to their ordinary business, right? They use their ordinary networks. Most of the people I know are white, so I call the people I know for a job opening that I hear about. And that's how people who traditionally left aside are kept out.
And you know what? You're speaking to networking, right? Which has been around in the job search forever, and so on and so forth. But it's going outside of your own tribe and your own network. That will probably, speaking of opportunity or being pushed by possibilities, this is an opportunity if you are a part of that community to use your calling, use your gifts, and network differently, and you may get a different result.
Emilio, if I may, let's just look at the data. The World Economic Forum has been tracking this in the future of work sector that they follow this stuff. It's real simple. Based on where you are born, zip code, neighborhood, etc., determines the amount of access to opportunity you will receive.
Right.
It is determined by them that 12 times the access you receive is based on, if you're born in Barrio or the hood versus Midtown Manhattan, 12 times the access of opportunity. And from college you go to clubs you go to neighborhood gatherings you attend, they become brokers of social capital. As Seth was pointing to, who do I know and who knows me?
So expanding that network.
The social capital that it becomes currency to you.
Yep.
And those become the number one metric for a CEO is what other CEO referred you to me. And so that has a right. So it's any wonder that when you're in an enterprise and then small business, kind of same thing, who's in your five? So that social capital and trading on currency for people becomes sameness.
Yeah.
When the growth really becomes outside of the norms, if you will, and you're missing the innovative creativity that will bring you the growth that you're going to need for the next view of this that Seth was pointing to when things grow back.
But it's fair to say, and I want to bring Rich Feller here because now we're going to get into, all right, so how do we reinvent the process? How do we deal with the process? But before, and Rich, well, there he is, Dr. Feller. Welcome to the barn.
Great to be here, and what a great audience to sit and listen to. Thank you. It's a privilege.
Dr. Feller, so you've heard about the need to make sure that you hone in on your calling, your gifts, your passions. We've talked about opportunity, not just in general terms, but more specifically, there is a need to expand your network in order to get, in front of the right people. But from your perspective, what are some of you are right in the middle of this right now. You're a career expert. You're coaching people all over the place. You probably get a lot more calls than any of us on this broadcast saying, "Help me! I need a job." What do we do in the middle of this mess?
Well, the first thing is we have to listen to what we just heard. Monica gave us an idea about cultural context and a lens. If we don't understand that, we can't go very far here tonight, folks. That's critical to what's happening. You think about Seth talking about this is really not going to recover to 2020. I mean, that's really, I think, a best estimate we can have from really thoughtful people. And Richard gets us to think about this notion of calling cards. That really, we got to go inside to figure out who we are. So with that understanding, I would suggest to you the people that I see every day and I talk to, they want some simple things about a job search. And I would say there are a couple things we have to understand about the situation. There's some things we have to do immediately, and there's some kind mind maps we have to follow. How do we keep kind to ourselves during this very troubling time? We're all feeling very isolated and need connections, not to mention the social capital issue that Monica so well expresses.
Let me throw a question that just came in over from our listeners. And Richard, this one is for you to lead us off. And then Dr. Feller, I want to come back and do your list of the tips of what we need to do. The question from the audience is, okay, I get that. I get that we have to reinvent or we need to do something a little bit different here. But how do you know that you're making the right transition? How do you deal with the transitions of your life? The old, I got to let go of this side of the trapeze to get to the next trapeze. But how do we, what's the short version? Hey, give me some transition advice.
Mm.
Well, Dr. Feller's probably maybe going to mention this, but the key is isolation is fatal. Don't go it alone. And that is, I'm not a big fan of networking unless there's reciprocity, unless it's back and forth and we add value and get value as opposed to just get value. And so finding a sounding board that you can work with and not go it alone, I think is absolutely fundamental to mental health today.
So sounding board, that's your third big tip for the day. Sounding board is critical. I use it. It's what helped me get through my transitions in life. And you know what? The transitions in life with a sounding board or a group of people that you can call to. And by the way, it doesn't have to be big. You're talking about 2 or 3 people in your sounding board. And these are people that will tell you the truth.
Right.
Yeah.
They will cheer you. They will help you, but they will tell you the truth. They will say, Emilio, you may want to rethink this thing about being an engineer. You have no business doing that.
Yeah, your committed listener, which is the number one person on your sounding board, is somebody who is not there to fix you. They practice care versus cure. They don't cure you. They just tell me more, help me, or let me help you understand what you're saying here. And so it's difficult, and they're interested as opposed to being
organized. They were sort of organic. They grew up on their own, supported by the faith community, all across the country, and they were groups of people who had lost their jobs and were coming together for companionship, mutual support, but also providing each other with tips, job advice, personal advice. And it was the fact that there was somebody in the same situation as you who was going through what you were going through and understood it in a way that other people didn't. Some of the embarrassment, the disgrace, the pain, the worrying about the bills, that their advice was very, very powerful. So I agree with Richard that support is really critical to getting through a time like this. And also figuring out who you are. Those people can help you to talk it through and think about it and maybe look at you with an objective lens in a way that the people who are closest to you may not be able to.
Seth, that's a great idea. And by the way, forget about finding a job club. Start one. Get yourself with your own sounding board and use that, frankly, at the same time. I love that concept of job clubs. I haven't heard that in a very long time. Dr. Feller, give us a list.
Yeah, I think you asked me to think through some things. And I think if I'm looking as a midlife person, as a question just came up, and I want to think about understanding what's going on for job search, I would say it's really about understanding your LinkedIn is your new resume. Most of us look to LinkedIn to find out you before we look at a resume. It's really a good way to vet people relatively quickly. That's a key. The second thing is, I think
LinkedIn is the new resume.
Without question. And if we're going to put that slide up, that would be helpful, but it's not critical. Secondly, I think we have to look at kind of recognizing that social capital, as we heard from Monica, is really important. Who are our 5 current best friends? How do we build our networks every day and at least commit an hour to that every day? That's critical. Regardless of your age, your network becomes your social capital. We have to understand we've got to expand our networks because we've got to get people to get our resume in their hand. And many times it's not a resume. It's because somebody vouched and vetted for you. Well, we got to have a network before you can give somebody that calling card, basically. Anyone who understands job hunting really understands it's a campaign. It's a marketing campaign. You've got to look at this nothing more than I would get myself known, witnessed, so that I can be identified. And recognize more than anything that the hiring process is not a hiring in process. It's a screening out process. Yeah. What can you do not to fall out of the list? That's the understandings we have to have.
Hey, Dr. Feller, I love this list. It's very practical. And for those of you who are asking me already, online, we will make these available on my site at emiliopardo.com, and we can send them to you or find me at Twitter. But Dr. Feller, that list that you just gave us, very, very relevant. How different is that list if you are someone over 50 years old? If you're an older person?
Yeah. First thing I tell people, 50-year-old, if you're not in LinkedIn, you're not going to be appreciated because it says you don't understand the current culture. You don't understand use technology. You're not understanding promotion. You're not understanding the ability to find leads because that is your new Rolodex. So I would say if you're not in LinkedIn and you're 50 plus, you've got to get there first because you quickly are ruled out. Because what people bring today is also their context, their social network, their gurus, those people you can call quickly to get information. People are hired for the people they bring with them. That's a critical issue. So you got to get there first.
Dr. Fellow, one small thing on the LinkedIn versus resume, which I completely agree. There is a process when you go into LinkedIn to tell your story. It's almost listing a resume, but it's not a resume. It reads like a story.
Yeah.
What have I done? What have I accomplished? And that is very different than a tactical resume that, it'll pass the test of the HR department. But the LinkedIn magic, I think, is that it allows you to go a little bit deeper into what your calling is and what your gifts are. So very, very good advice. What else do you have?
Well, I think about LinkedIn also, it helps you tell your story. And by telling your story, you document and begin to add value proposition to your resume. So they really come together. It's really a practice for them. And the second thing is, let's do some things right now. First of all, find a temporary income generator. Get a gig to survive, because clearly you've got to do that while you're upgrading your title investment. You can't throw away your old job. Keep that old investment you have, but you got to get a day job, as Richard calls it. How do you invest in a small gig to keep the money coming in? Secondly, you've got to have a story about the short course or the class you're taking. Show the person you're learning right now, because they're trying to hire learners. So every resume, every story, I tell my client, you've got to be in a one-day class or a program or a Coursera course to let them know you're still learning. That's critical. And here's a real tricky one, but an important one. Find somebody who will let you have a virtual, an interim virtual position. Find somebody who will let you be an intern or be a research assistant or be a consultant. I frequently take my graduate students when they're between jobs and say, come to my company and I'll call you a research assistant, because that allows you to tell people you're still learning, you're engaged, and you're finding more to understand about your title job. Then you've also got to find a way, I think, to keep some mindset about this whole process, to really be kind to yourself, to be self-caring. And the first thing is understand you're way more than your job title. So when you lose your job, don't lose who you are. Your identity is not your job. That's critical.
That's so hard to do, right? That is so hard to do, and especially, Monica, in communities that we tell, right? I mean, you find that every time that you get in front of crowds. The sense of loss that I'm no longer the director of marketing or whatever that title is.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. If you put the lens of gender and race on top of this, along with where you started, transition, mental health, yourself some grace, I think, to allow yourself to be okay with you. There were 4 frames I had to come up with, and I think it speaks back to Richard Leiter with the discovery of know who you are and who you are. If you look at a picture frame, you really kind of do know who you are and who you aren't. But being okay with that is a journey. I often tell people now, I had to get to that place, particularly as a Black woman, that I know who I am and I know who I'm not. The second part of that was there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
You don't need to be fixed. You know, no more leadership development and conference for this and conference for that. Be okay.
And by the way, that's the only thing that we can do in the middle of these 3 pandemics.
Oh,
by the way, I call them 3 pandemics because I think there's an economic pandemic, which is affecting the job market.
Absolutely.
There's a social injustice pandemic, which is where, right, in that. And then you got the real pandemic, which is killing us.
And then the third,
real talk perspective.
Real talk.
You have to ground yourself in the person that knows who you're feeling and your passion, and that's
absolutely. And give yourself grace there to do that. And there's nothing wrong with you. The third one is everyone's got a situation, air quotes, and you pray to God every day it doesn't wind up being tweeted out or put on Facebook or something. Everyone's got a situation. The fourth one, I think, which is what all these you 4 men have spoken to so beautifully, is people of color really haven't had an opportunity to wrestle with. There have been some breakthrough moments with people from Dr. Dre to Obama to Megan Thee Stallion in New York Times, okay? It's power. You know,
Yep.
are you comfortable with power? Holy Ghost or otherwise, are you comfortable with power?
Huh.
And that is one that allows you to free flow your way through these moments. If I'm aging, if I'm young going into this thing with a free voice, if I'm Chance the Rapper, or if I'm Lin-Manuel creating a rap Broadway show and I'm going to do it if it kills me. Am I comfortable in rooms of power with new ideas when I know who I am and who I'm not? I don't need to be fixed. And I got a situation, whatever it might be, and I pray to God it doesn't go public, but I'm going to be comfortable with power.
Monica, I have to say, all the people that you mentioned, all of the examples you talked about, have one thing in common.
What's
it's
that?
Not the color of their skin. It's not their gender. It's their passion.
There you go.
Every single one of them went for a job that had passion. And
that in the middle of the picture.
They didn't have to. They added their gift. They were good at it. You got to have that. But I love it. It's that passion that you're getting it through. Dr. Feller, I know you have a little bit more. Do you have any more on your list, or is that it?
Yeah, I think the whole notion that jobs are problems to be solved. And I think what anybody's looking for hope or possibilities, you really got to take a look at what challenges really motivate me internally. And then locate organizations within your communities that tap into that. And when you get there, you're going to find that people are there who are your best tutors and mentors and connections. So I think the key is finding what challenges you internally, find out the organizations in your local community that tap into that. And inside there will be tons of people who have different jobs with different training. They're really your tutors, your leaders, your mentors, the people who get you the privileged information on how to get that resume handed to someone.
I love it. By the way, guys, I want to do a lightning round here for everybody. Mm-hmm. And this one is one that affects all of us equally, or maybe some of us like me, probably even more. And that is the use of technology. How has now in the middle of these pandemics, I mean, listen, we are in the, what I call the Brady Bunch squares, right? We won't get into who's Marsha or who Peter is, but having said that, what are you seeing out there as far as your own technology prowess and your own technology know-how that you can give some advice on things that you have done in the middle of this pandemic that you have learned to do from a technology perspective? Because frankly, even as we sit here tonight, I'm sure there's some people like one of our viewers, Kate, who's been having problems with her connectivity. That is a reality for all of us, that we now have a 10 by 15 screen that we are pitching ourselves to. It's no longer in the office across the desk from the hiring partner or whomever is hiring you. Now you're pitching yourself through a camera. Fast turnaround. What have you guys done during this pandemic on technology that is different than what you were doing before? And let's go to Seth. Let's put him on the spot.
Oh, well, I've never been especially good with technology, so I have learned how to do what I'm doing right now, which is to speak looking at the tiny little eye of a camera,
right,
rather than making eye contact with all of you, which I do by looking down, and it makes it look like I'm not paying attention.
Right.
So that has been a very important part. How to make eye contact through a camera is very challenging. But just to pick up sort of a less silly point and a sort of a more serious point on this, Emilio, because this is really important. For folks like us, this kind of communication is regular, right? We've become used to it. We've been doing it for months now. Some of us were doing it even before the pandemic. Our friends or clients or employers are able to work with us remotely. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, only about 25% of Americans are able to work remotely, and not all of them are doing that using technology. So one of the things that this COVID pandemic has exposed is the tremendous digital divide we have in the United States, so that folks like us, particularly people who look like me, are able to tangle with this pandemic from home safely using technology in order to keep our jobs going and keep the money flowing. But there are lots and lots and lots of people who have to go out and put themselves at risk, put their kids in some kind of daycare, put them at risk in order to be able to support their families. So that's another part of the exposed divides that we have in our country that this pandemic has helped show us.
I could not agree more. And by the way, your tip about looking straight into that camera, that goes for everybody. Because guess what? More than likely, that job interview is going to be that little circle in that camera. And you're going to have to learn how to get along with it. By the way, 70% of all communication, 70% of all communication is nonverbal. So if I'm looking down, my nonverbals are, you don't care, to your point. And, 27% is, your tone of your voice. And the rest of it are the words, are the actual text. So imagine if you're not used to looking at that camera. I love that. Dr. Feller, what have you learned the last couple of months?
Find the youngest person in your circle and reverse mentor them. They're the ones who know technology. You can share with them what you know. They need something as well. Personally, I've been enthralled by what I've learned because I've had to jump in and become a virtual person. We've even been to a board game and converted to a virtual board game and a whole new platform called Conversations Matters to get people to talk about isolation and get in breakout groups and get them to get feedback from each other, hear about what they do well about their gifts and so forth. So find the youngest person you can, make them your reverse mentor.
I love that. By the way, that's what I did. And I'm not sure that he was that young, but I met Stefan Kaplan, who is our producer, who is in the background right now trying to figure it all out. And he was my key to the learning process. Monica, what have you learned in the last couple of months?
In addition to what these two gentlemen said, I learned about esports and gaming.
Oh, how so?
Because it is the next platform. It was already there, let me be clear, but it has become a relevancy body of work for talent. Employers.
Right. And if I hear you correctly, it's the skills that you have.
The skills of a game
are transferable in some way, to key jobs in the economy.
Yeah, I call it the beast meeting the brilliance. And I had to learn it because of our work with the NFL and the NBA. It's eclipsing the size of Major League Baseball globally. And I learned a new word, metaverse. It's a boundaryless environment that allows you to play and think and think in new ways. And man, is it challenging. So Rich, I have some young people mentoring me.
There you go. Don't be afraid of expanding your network. That was one of the tips that we had here. How about the Pope of Purpose? Rich, what do you have? What have you learned the last 5 months?
Well, I'm a little bit of the reverse here, and that is that I believe that the internet and Zoom is hijacking the human moment. And people are really feeling a yearning to be listened to.
Yes.
So what I've learned, I do a lot of webinars where there's maybe 1,000 people around the world on the webinar. But the real power I'm learning of this medium is listening. Mm-hmm. And so I'm learning to listen via technology, which is a whole new area because trained as a counselor and as a coach, I'm used to having the nuance, as you said, the 70% in front of me. And I'm learning now that people are really yearning for their voice to be heard and listened to at a deeper level. And whether we can get to that deeper level using this medium, I don't know, but I'm working on it.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of mediums and time, we are out of time. Unfortunately, I can see from the comments that we need to do another one of these and drill down more specifically into what can I train myself to do differently. Yeah. And we're talking about a lot of different common sense, technical at times, easy stuff, but it's common practice that we need to deal with. And let me bring in our producer, Stefan. Thank you for helping us get through this whole hour. It's been filled with probably one of the more useful, filled with tips and tactics that we have had, but clearly we need to do more. Stefan, what are some of your words of wisdom as we say goodnight?
Well, I'll say two quick things. One is it's an honor sitting next to Mr. Seth Harris on the screen here virtually.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's been a while since we've seen each other, but The one thing that I wanted to say is that when you guys were earlier talking about reskilling and everything else, that is the one thing that I did when the pandemic hit, was that I've been in social media now for 10 years since it began pretty much. I come from the 20-year background at the New York Times as a wire service supervising photo editor. And I said to myself, okay, social media is where it's at. But now with the pandemic, since we're not going to be able to leave our homes, I adopted this new live streaming technology, and here we are today. I'm producing shows, I'm directing shows, I'm creating shows with people. And, you know, Seth and I were talking about this the other day, that this is what's needed. I mean, this is where it's at right now, because in my opinion, live streaming is the natural evolution of social media, and social media helps to amplify the live streaming.
That's
so everybody needs to learn new skills, even somebody such as myself, who's been in the social media game for 10 years and is a coach to many people on this screen. So
I love it. I love it. And you have become a whiz. I call him the wizard behind the keys. And I want to say thank you, like always. And I want to say thank you to all of our guests in Real Talk. Seth Harris, thank you, my brother. You are one and only, and thank you. Keep up the good work, and make sure that after that election, we have some answers here for us. Dr. Feller, like always, we got to have you back. Let's do a show just on your list of goodies and drill down. Monica Hawkins, like always, thank you for your insights. Always make you want to sit back and think all over again. And the one and only Richard Leiter, the Pope of Purpose. Thank you, sir. You not only have inspired us, but thank you for your napkin test. I know I'm going to use it, and I know that I'll be looking for that push by possibilities rather than by negative. But thank you so much to everybody, and to all of you out there. Send me your emails with what you want to hear next. Tell me what you need, and I'll be there for you. And thank you for coming to the Real Talk. But more importantly, have a good time. Stay strong. Stay healthy. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Emilio.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.